Hello and welcome to Raising Excellence. Our MC for today is Tim.
Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Raising Excellence, one of the most valuable hours of your day. I'm Tim, your MCCC for today's adventure. This week, we're continuing the Foundations of Self Development class, and this is our last week accountability. I know everybody loves accountability, so I'm looking forward to a good show. So, today's show is the secret key to your success. And it's Monday, so towards the end of the hour, we'll be checking on our journaling success for the past weeks. Now, let's meet our fabulous hosts. We have Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator,
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
and Willow, our trauma consultant.
Hi,
Who needs?
everyone.
How are you? And so this week, if you're viewing live and you have a question, please feel free to input into the chat, and we'll be presenting the exercise of the week and why accountability is important to the end of the class. And what we'd like to do is kind of a recap. And the class started on January 9th, so it seems like a while ago. We've done 38 shows. Since then, I was kind of amazed. Great job, team, for that. And we started with self-discovery, and that was some kind of personality testing to try to understand a little bit more about ourselves, what our values are. We did a values exercise, which I really enjoyed, and then a time study to kind of see how we're spending our time and are we aligning our time with our values, and are there any adjustments that we might want to make, and we might have learned something from where we're actually spending our time.
So hang on a
Then we
second, hang
spent.
on a second. So each
Mhm.
week since January 9th, we've been going through this course, right? Starting with
Yep.
the self-discovery. It's been really, really good. Really, I just wanted to clarify that each week is a different topic.
Yep, each week is a different topic. And so week 4 or 5 was the baggage, so dropping our baggage. And that's a pretty, yeah, important topic. And maybe some of us are still carrying some baggage and we can go back and do some more exercises. I don't think that's an ongoing thing through
It's
life.
nothing. That's not something that's gonna ever end. Just letting
Nothing
go
that
of
ends
baggage. You got
anytime
childhood.
soon.
You got baggage.
I think diminishing our reactivity to the baggage is very helpful to our self development. And the next week, we did a visioning exercise where we wanted to create a vision of kind of our relatively ideal future. Of course, those things change over time. And then we did an exercise of having our future self speak back to our current selves and say, hey, maybe you want to try this thing. So give some advice to our current selves. And then once we had that advice, we did a week on planning. So planning on what actions we were going to take based on the new information that we've been learning.
And that was only 3 weeks ago.
Yes, and that was only 3 weeks ago. And then the last one was kind of executing your
Practice.
plans, so putting it into action. And after you decide what you want to do, then actually doing it. And this week is accountability. So, what did we say we're going to do? What did we actually do? What kind of positive results did we run into? And then what struggles did we have?
And how did you enjoy procrastination?
Yes. And so maybe will be a good time to kind of ask you all like what you learned or what you achieved or how you benefited, and then maybe some of the struggles that you ran into during it, maybe during the course and then during also the execution phase.
Yeah, it was a little mind blowing for me, this course, because I've done a lot of self discovery and I've done a lot of exercises, and I've done pretty much most of these exercises at some point in the last 20 years. But um, doing it live on a podcast with people watching, and by the way, if you're watching this, you can still go back to January 9th podcast and you can still rewatch all those episodes and do all the exercises along with us, right? But so we did one a week. And yeah, the growth. Like, holy shit, the growth. I didn't know it was gonna. I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna do those little exercises like I always do. No big deal. Yeah, that's not what happened. It was challenging. It was hard. I cried. I whined. I complained. I did it anyway, and I succeeded. And I'm not grateful. Yeah, I am. Yeah, but it was not fun. I mean, yeah, it was fun. It was fun. But at times I had to like push myself past the things, and I knew somebody was going to ask me on Monday, "Oh, did you do your exercises?" And I was going to have to say, "No, I didn't." And that kind of kept me going. Yeah. Kept me going. What about you, Willow?
So,
Oh, Willow's yawning. I'm sorry.
I'm like, one moment.
It sounds like work.
Um,
I don't want to do it.
that was kind of my experience, the same as you, where I had a lot of, what's the word?
Resistance?
Resistance. That's exactly the word I was looking for. A lot of resistance to a lot of the activities. I found myself doing them like last minute because I knew that someone was going to ask me about them. And when I was like being held accountable, it was really insightful. I learned a lot of things about myself that, well, kind of that I already knew, but didn't want to acknowledge.
I
And then
kind of
some
want to
that
go back to the beginning and do it all over again.
I, I would, I don't know. Because part of me is like, yeah, that sounds like it's a lot of fun. And the other part's like, no, we did it once. That was enough.
We might go back to it next January
so
as a
what
group.
you
That's
all,
acceptable. That's a substantial amount of time in between
yes,
having to end this and start the next one.
but what you all don't understand is that we just skim the surface every week because we took one exercise, and there are a set of, you know, 5 to 10 different things that we could have done to kind of create more depth during those time frames and create more rapid transformation and more growth. And really, it's designed to build on top of each other so that you're discovering, you're building confidence, you're taking risks. And I think for me, what was really helpful was having you all to, you know, bounce these things off of, and then to hold me accountable to come with what I said I was going to deliver. And so I really appreciate you all being there, and then having the being able to form these relationships through the podcast and through the weeks that we're having these conversations has been very valuable. And knowing that you all have my back on anything that I run into, and then having your wise counsel for all the things that you inevitably run into was very, very helpful.
And it's funny because you designed this course. So you took all these elements, you gathered them from all over the world, and you put them together in the course. But then you went through the course, which was a whole other experience than actually creating the course, right?
Really, it was. I think it was just something that I wanted to go through, and in crafting it, I just kind of imagined putting together the separate things that I had done in the past in a logical order that would build on each other to create kind of the maximum effect. And a lot of it was, yeah, forcing yourself through a narrow doorway, right? So you come out on the other side and create some growth. And I'm really looking forward to kind of continuing the journey with you all, and then digging deeper into some of the items on my own, and then learning what everyone in Raising Excellence is going to bring to the party next, because I know there's a huge set of other subjects and activities that you all are bringing to the podcast as well.
Yeah, and we're for the most part committed to doing like an exercise every Monday and then following with our results. Next week is a little different because we're celebrating International Women's Day. So we're going to just have guest speakers all week. But in most part, we do a lot of self-discovery.
So I wanted to talk about one struggle that I had last week. I committed to a few days, and I didn't really put a number on it, of intermittent fasting. So that meant that I needed to stop eating in the evening and then not eat until sometime like after lunchtime, roughly. So I usually run at lunch, and that worked out pretty well. And then my daughter kind of called me on it, and she said, "Well, you can't have cream in your coffee, so because that's calories. That breaks your fast." so
I think
actually,
teenagers are purists, is what I think.
yeah. So I did that for a couple of days, and then I had
And it
like
sucked so bad.
it kind of sucked. And then like on Thursday, I was driving into work, and I was like, oh man, I need to get a coffee. And then I was, oh, reminded myself, no, I made my commitment. And then on Friday, I said, to hell with it. I have to have a coffee with cream. So there's some addiction there. There's an emotional addiction to it. But
Emotional addiction, because, well, I mean, your coffee is the one thing you can control what goes in it, right? And suddenly somebody took that control away from you, the one thing that you have 100% control over in your
well,
life.
I managed for 2 or 3 days, and but I felt the pull of it, and I think that was important to feel the pull of it. And there's been times in the past where I've taken months off of coffee, but it's been a while, and um, it's kind of a crutch. I can see it.
And it's funny because if you just didn't say that last bit, I was going to say that's like my journaling exercise. But it's not a crutch. It's just like I have to really push myself to do it. And then I do it. And then it's fine. And then it's beneficial. And then I feel I reap the benefits of doing the journaling. The stress goes down. It works. All of it works. But to like get me to do it is sometimes like pulling teeth.
I wanted
So,
to, sorry.
no, Willem, go ahead.
I was gonna say I wanted to comment on the a different side of accountability that I've seen this week. Maybe not just this week. Maybe it's been a couple weeks, but I've noticed it because we've been talking about accountability since our meeting. Uh, the girls have had moments where we need a friend, we need to talk to someone, and we'll call each other or text each other, and basically lay out our claim, state whatever is bothering us, and not only are we holding each other accountable to the things that they have done, we each have done wrong, but we're also holding each other accountable to the things that they have accomplished. And I've noticed that that seems to help a lot, where it's like, okay, this is what you believe. This is evidence as to what you've accomplished. You get to keep that too, just like you get to keep your faults and the things that you did wrong.
Well, sometimes when we're stressed, we get a little bit unclear. Like, is this reality or is this reality? Am I really a good writer or am I a really shitty writer? That one person didn't pay their bills, so maybe I'm really shitty and I just don't know it. Maybe I've been, and then the group goes, no, hang on. How many people have told you were good? Yeah, many. Okay, and this one guy said you were bad? Mm-hmm. Because he didn't want to pay his bill? Mm-hmm. Okay, see the logic there? There's no logic there. I like that.
Yeah, so I think there is that aspect of calling reality for our people, because you can't always see when you're in it exactly what's going on, and maybe you create some distortions in your mind that you need to clear. And having someone to bounce it off of really does help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's part of dropping our baggage, I think, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose, yes. Raising excellence, dropping the baggage, changing the world.
Well, I really like that the values exercise, because it kind of made me really think about how I was spending my time, and then was I being congruent, and then
Oh
if
yeah, that was the
not,
2 weeks put together, values and how you spend your time.
like what did I need to change with the way that I spend my time? And I've actually made a lot of changes, and now they're just habits for the most part, so it doesn't really seem like it, but I know that a lot of things are different, and I'm approaching things in a different way, and I'm uh, making a lot more progress, but now it seems just normal.
By the way, that was brilliant the way you put the values with the how you spend your time right next to each other. Because I was all gang ho about my values, and I was like, okay, I know my values. These are my values. I wrote them down. I was all proud of them. I was like, yeah, that's right. And then the next week it was like, how do you spend your time? Is it in line with your values? And that was like stepping on a rake. Yo,
Yes.
okay.
Oh, well, I sit in front of the television for 4 hours. Okay. All right. Watching who knows what.
Like Star
Yeah.
Trek or something, right? Because that's useful.
Well, and then, I mean, making a commitment to collaborate in this way, and then having the pre-meeting and spending the time working things out, and then being responsible for the show and the success of the show, all that is responsibility, um, and it takes a lot of planning, and it's moving in the right direction.
But in a weird way, doing the Raising Excellence has provided an anchor for me, sort of like a routine does for a 2-year-old. That there are certain things I have to do throughout the week, and there are 4 times a week because we have our planning meeting too, right? So there's 3 shows in the planning meeting, and so those 4 times I have to be there on time. I have to be turned on. My brain has to be functional as much as it can be with this current circumstances, and I have to do my absolute best. And that's not easy sometimes, but I make sure I do it, because if I don't do it, like it's almost like a point of pride. Like, okay, so I'm having a really bad day, and I'm still like teary-eyed from the last whatever experience I had. It wasn't good. And I still have to take a deep breath. I have to put on my eyebrows and stop here in front of the camera and be happy, be good. Not necessarily happy, but
You're holding this crew together, Agnieszka.
with duct tape.
You hold the crew together.
It's all good. But it's really
Even when
cool.
we're sick,
Yes.
you show up.
I don't give myself the opportunity to not do it. Like, it's not an option for me. I feel it's my responsibility and I have to do it. So
I had to learn
works.
like, I don't know how to explain it. I had to learn how to stop doing that in a way where I would just be like, I have to do this, I have to do that, I just have to. Um, and doing the values and how you're spending your time helped me realize, like, no, I don't really have to spend time doing all of this stuff. I could find a workaround, I can find something else. But I had to, yeah, literally just do the opposite where I was like, okay, I can't take on everything at once.
Yeah. Yeah, and that pendulum can swing either way, right? It's not that the pendulum is one way and it's going to be one way forever. Like, you might have this issue today, but might have this issue another day, and like addressing it as it comes up.
Yeah, so kind of being flexible to what's going on in the moment, but having some boundaries, living within the boundaries as much as possible, and having some responsibilities, place you have to be, and things you have to do, and people who depend on you. I mean, it creates a real sense of like purpose and journey, and it allows you to build your skills, kind of like putting a new coat of paint on every time you do it, right? It just gets thicker and thicker, and the habit gets thicker and thicker, and you're building productive
Absolutely.
habits. And that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, but today is accountability. So we not only have to be accountable for explaining how the course worked for the last several weeks, but also how accountability can help people, and it's helping us today.
Well, and also what it feels like to be held accountable, because sometimes that's a really triggering experience, and other times it's let's say, I can't think of another example.
Well, it's I think just the word itself kind of, I mean, can be offensive if you can be triggered by it. Why is somebody else holding me accountable? And really, it's asking other people to hold you accountable.
Well, it's more like,
Even
if it comes out of your mouth and you agree to it, then that's golden. That word turns into, like, a rock that falls on your head if you don't do it. I don't know. That's how I
even
visualize it.
I was thinking even like not just external uh stimulus, but like your own inner thoughts. Uh Sorry, my own inner thoughts are not cooperating with me right now. They're like, nope, nope, just shut up.
Oh,
You
you're
gotta
doing
stop
fine.
doing that.
Oh, you're doing
Oh
fine.
no, I know I'm doing fine. I'm just explaining because I'm like, man, it's not working right now. So
So, but how do you manage your inner thoughts, Willow? Like, how can you control your
I
inner thoughts?
the first step was to stop trying. When
So,
I do exactly what I just did, where it's like, oh, okay, they're not cooperating with me. I need to stop trying to get them to do exactly what I want, maybe explain to other people who are witnessing the deer in headlights look because I'm talking to a bunch of people in my head. So that's usually why I used to and still do sometimes. I'm trying to work on it, like self-deprecate, where I'm like, um, oh, I'm just out of it today. I don't know what I'm talking about. Is any of this making sense? It's just a way
Yeah,
of
yeah, you shouldn't
explaining.
do that.
It's just a way of explaining that I'm in my own head right now and I'm trying to make sense of what is being said in my head because I can't just blurt it all out. I have a bunch of different parts who have different desires and needs, and they want to say things all at once. And I have to kind of just give them their space to say what they have to say and then make sense of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
Very
sense.
nice. Well, I like, Agnieszka, what you were saying about when you say that you're going to do something, or when you give your word, or that you're held accountable, or you hold yourself accountable to that thing. Because think about how many people we run into who say things and then they do something exactly opposite. And how valuable is it to be around people and to be working with people who do what they say they're going to do, and they take pride in it, and they value excellence. And then what value do you place on those people over and above people who don't do what they say they're going to do?
Yeah, but also it's like every time you say something, you're gonna like. I mean, shit happens. You can get sick. You can feel bad. Whatever, right? But for the most part, if I commit to something, especially when there are people counting on it, I try to make sure that I'm there with it.
Yeah, it's not perfection. It's not all or nothing, but it's uh, much more often than not
Yeah, but of
dependability.
course, as soon as I'm saying it, all the instances where I didn't fulfill my obligations keep coming to, well, remember last summer? Remember last week? But that's not the point, as long as we're like striving for excellence, reaching for excellence.
Yeah, and I think that's also where some of the conflict comes in, when you feel like it has to be all or nothing, like 100% of the time, or perfectionism, or it has to be perfect. It's more like I'm consistently giving this, and you can depend on me to give this. And if something changes, I'll try to communicate the when, why, and how that's changing, and so that nobody's surprised, and that so you're not surprising people with bad news, right? Oh, I didn't show up today, or I didn't deliver your product, or I didn't, meet my commitment. Those are the things that we want to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really, it's if you have, if you're in a relationship or you're in a family, and everybody has relationships of some sort, it's really a key to communication is, can I depend on you? And can you depend on me to do what you say you're going to do? And then it
So,
leads to harmony.
right, right, because nobody is like upset. And but as long as there's communication, people are telling each other, "Oh, I would like you to do this," because otherwise, if it's like mind reading situation, that's not a good situation. But what was like
Mind reading, fortune telling.
fortune telling? Yeah, exactly. What I was going to say is, um, in the vein of accountability. I mean, we did the course with you, Tim, since January 9th, so that's like
I know. And
almost
thank you for doing that. Thank you
almost
for
two
taking the
months.
risk.
Almost 2 months, yeah.
I
Um,
mean,
and
you all devoted a lot of time to it, and I really appreciate you trusting me to put something together that would be valuable,
it was
and
absolutely valuable.
putting your energy into it.
But there's no doubt in my mind that it was valuable. And even like when you first presented it, I wasn't sure exactly where you were going with it. And I found some of the exercises familiar. So I was like, maybe, maybe not. But then when I actually tried the exercises, it was like, whoa, this is interesting. And I think that there's a lot of NLP the way you put it one after the other,
So,
right?
is that something that you can tell me about?
Well, I mean, the way even putting like values and then how you spend your time right next week back to back. We have a listener from Periscope who says the key to success is patience, no more questions. But patience will not give you accountability and practice. And what was the other P? Projection? No. What was 2
But
weeks ago?
patience Patience will allow those other habits to form. Like you can't have those other habits if you don't have patience. So I would say that yeah, maybe key isn't the right word, a foundational step.
Well, I was posing in the title for today's episode that key to your success is accountability. Like
Yeah.
continuing to work in the direction you're going to and continuing to be accountable for your work. And that requires patience.
Well, I like the patience aspect because it kind of fits in with the widening your window of tolerance. Right? So, can you stay emotionally regulated in difficult or stressful environments or under criticism so that you can use your brain instead of your reptile brain to make decisions and communicate in a more effective manner?
Do you have a
And
course
that
on
leads
that, Tim?
to much better decisions.
That's mine. It's like, you can't have that. It's mine.
Okay, someone is working for a course on that. On a course on that. That's all I wanted to know. That's all I wanted to know.
I have a lot of material on that, so I can help you out with that. Willow.
That's
See,
great.
there you go.
That was just a prime example of being emotionally dysregulated, where I'm like, no, no, you can't have it. I don't want to hear anything
Mine.
else about it.
That,
Mine, mine,
that's
mine,
mine. Mine.
You guys could just put your like position your two courses differently and have each mic them, and it'd still be useful to have more than one.
Yeah, I think one thing that really stands out for me in that area of window of tolerance is communication and dysregulation that we got in some of the role plays. So we've done some role plays where we were just role playing and we couldn't step out of our dysregulation to do the role play. So that's how hard it is.
Yeah, I can't remember if we did it live. I think we did. Me and Agnieszka did do the live one where she was asking so many questions so quickly that I became completely dysregulated. I just shut up because I didn't know what else to do. And so yeah, I went through that exact same
You
thing.
asked me to do it.
I know. You did it really well.
Oh, thank you. I think.
So having that window of tolerance, even during a role play, and then having a strategy for communication that we don't lose sight of when we get agitated, and it's a difficult one.
Okay, so what's the number one lesson that you learned from your own course, from taking your own course, Tim?
I think that all this stuff is integrated and it's like a ladder. And as you step up the ladder, you increase your value and you increase the value of your activities. And
You mean like monetary value, like you get paid more?
no, you just increase your confidence and the way you uh, put your value into the world. And then maybe you feel better or more confident or more grounded or more able to manage challenges as you move up uh, kind of the learning to shed some things, pick up some other things, work within your values. And when you're working within your values, then you put effort into it, you care, the care goes into it. You're not just going through the motions. And people can see that when that happens.
Yeah.
So when you were just talking, it sounded like you were trying to find a better word to describe like being better able to respond to your environment accurately.
Yeah, there's some of that for sure.
So, something I was fascinated when I found this out. Do you know the definition of responsible?
Able to respond?
Able to respond, correct. And that blew my mind because it was not at all in line with what I thought. I thought being responsible meant doing the things that you had to do to be able to function in a relationship, in a workspace, where it would apply any rules from any situation. But when I read it as an able to respond, I was like, oh, that's just self-esteem. That's confidence that even if this is something you've never encountered before, you will be able to respond to it well enough.
Yeah,
And I think that's what like our course, all of our courses, Raising Excellence, the whole reason we're together is to make people responsible, able to respond to their environment the way that they want to.
And
Yeah,
I
but it's
like
not
that.
easy.
No, it's not
No,
easy.
it is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it is so, so worth it.
Because
The
that,
other
like,
thing,
because there's always, sorry, go ahead. This, I mean, not go ahead. There's this wounded part of me that, like, wants to, like, some things that don't trigger me, I can respond beautifully. And people are like, wow, that's a really good response. Question. It was a great question. But when something really touches me deeply, I'm just like, yee.
Me too.
But then I don't show it. So I just kind of freeze. And
It
then I don't
depends
know
on
what
the
to say.
situation for me.
So, okay, Tim, it's your
no,
turn.
I think that all that is very good and also true, and that being able to respond to events is one thing, and then being able to create your own events is another thing. And what I think that being aligned with your values and putting them into the world allows you to be creative, to create, and to not always be responding, but to be producing and producing
Moving from
creatively.
consumption to production.
Yes, moving from consumption to production. That's the exact idea. Not being passive, but being active in your own life. So
I was
creating
going to
your own
say
path.
acting instead of reacting.
I remember it was sometime last summer when Tim looked at me one day and said, when is it when we're going to move from production or from consumption to production? And then it sat in my brain for a few months and it sort of like grew and it gave birth to Raising Excellence podcast.
I don't know if it's just because you were mentioning it, but I totally remember you saying the same thing to me. I wonder if it was like just a couple weeks after Tim said it and you were like, we need to do this.
Move from consumption to production. We can't
Yeah, almost
consume.
verbatim.
Well, yeah, because I was really fascinated with that sentence. I actually wrote it on my board here too.
Well, I think we all love to consume. Like it's easy to like flip on a podcast or YouTube or something when you're driving to work or you're out doing something and you're consuming. It's more difficult, but much more satisfying to produce and to influence people in a positive way and to create value in the world. And I think like I've had some days, I'm just now getting a grip on some of that where I produce something almost the whole day and then I rest. And then I can't think of any more satisfying days than those when I just put forth the effort and things come out and I can look back and say those things are done and I or they're partially done or I'm moving in the right direction and there's just a sense of things are right with the world when you're doing that. Now I love to consume, don't get me wrong, but I'm learning to love to produce.
Yeah, and you know what? The one common thing that yesterday I was in Autonomy at school in the Autonomy classroom, and we were talking to some new students for season 3, and I noticed that there were a lot of podcasters in the room with us. So I basically just asked the general question, what's the most difficult thing about podcasting, and what the most rewarding thing about podcasting is, and hands down, even one of the new students who has a podcast said, you know what, doing the podcast is important for me. Now, even if nobody listens to it, even if nobody ever sees it, it has become such a rewarding part of my life. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. Moving from consumption to production, actually sharing your ideas with the world and not just taking in what other people have thought of or figured out or whatever.
Well, I also feel like it's a reason. It's a validation. Like consuming something is great. Um, but producing something, you have to consume a bunch of things to be able to produce something. So it kind of gives a purpose to that consumption instead of just consuming every bit of junk that you can possibly get your hands on. You're like, oh, okay, well, what can this junk do for me? Can I put this junk together and I can make a podcast from it, talk about the things that I've learned? Can I go spread this to my family? How can I
Can I make a
implement
bunch
this
of
in my life?
widgets? It doesn't have to be about podcasting or writing or whatever. It could be like making stuff, like making, my medieval underwear.
Because I'll tell you, I used My husband's really, really good about not sitting around and consuming a bunch of entertainment. And I admire him for that because I don't have that self-control. I love to watch fantasy movies. I could sit and read a fantasy book and forget to eat, drink, sleep, say hi to people who walk by me and say, "Hi, Sam, how are you?"
Sorry, I'm
um,
in the book right now. Talk to you.
yeah,
Talk to you in a couple of days.
but I guarantee you, I don't feel near as guilty about sitting around and watching Lord of the Rings for the fun of it as I did when I rewatched it and I was trying to put together the Jungian, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Jungian archetypes and how they are in um, the literature and how that correlates to basically, I was creating a section for my book about the history of parts and how parts have been implemented in storylines, religion, all this other stuff. Of course, the first one I thought of was, Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. I'm like, yeah.
Well,
So I don't know how to tie that in. I don't know
no,
where I was going with
that's a good. See,
it.
stop
So
saying.
Trailing off. Take over.
well, you're producing and you were looking at it critically, and then you were drawing something out of it and making something new.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that production doesn't have to be, it just has to be you expressing what's in your heart to the outside world in whatever way suits you, right? Like making widgets or sewing or painting or whatever.
Yeah, or art or presenting or podcasting, whatever it might be. I mean, I was just thinking about the people in Raising Excellence and Autonomy who challenged me to produce some things, and then I produced a few presentations, and I really got a lot out of the process because I felt like I was producing. I was not. I had to consume the information, but then I repackaged it in a interesting and logical fashion that could be conveyed. So much information that we get today can't be conveyed in a understandable fashion. Like it's just too confusing, or uh, it's difficult, or being able to convey information in an entertaining and understanding, easily understandable package. That's a real skill that I'm working on.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important to, like, I think that a lot of information these days is sort of hidden and not easily accessible to people, and there are so many things that you can do in order to strengthen yourself, make yourself more confident, make yourself healthier. Just like taking charge of your life away from the news media, the doctors, the lawyers, whatever, like people, and bringing back to yourself, right? Like just say, what do I need? How do I deal with this? And using those resources like lawyers and doctors, whatever, as needed, but making sure that the responsibility is not abdicated, that it's in within you, and that you're responsible for your own self in every interaction with the outside world. And that is a big lesson for me because I'm still learning how to do that.
You are not alone in that because I think we all are, just different areas.
Because I
Like
really
I like
like
to,
having a babysitter. It's easy to have a babysitter.
oh yeah, until they tell you can't do something that you want to do.
Yeah,
Well, then you can scream and get what you want, right?
you
Roll
Maybe.
could.
around, roll around on
Depends.
the ground, and pull out your hair.
You could.
Depends.
Or fire the babysitter.
But I think there's a natural tension when you're not aligned with your values, and people don't understand what that is, and maybe they don't take time to actually understand why that is, or where the values are, and where the differences are, and what they're doing versus what they say they value. And that natural tension can lead you in the right direction if you listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember struggling with that as a young girl, and picking and choosing companies that would be in line with my values because I did not want to, create weapons of war or stuff like that.
Well, I
Yeah.
wrote a article a couple months back about, or a blog. It was a little blog article about how the title says emotions are information, not road signs. They're not or emotions are information, not instructions. And I was gonna tie this in with accountability and how there's a couple of parts, usually the managers who their whole job is to hold you accountable and to motivate you. And
Hang on,
yeah,
you've been talking about parts a lot today, but you haven't really introduced what that concept is. Can you just quickly tell us what parts are, just in case somebody's listening not familiar?
yeah. So I, excuse me, I incorporate the internal family system model, which was created by Richard Schwartz. It is basically the basic assumption is that inside of your mind, basically, you have all these different parts. So you have a part who wants to go exercise, but also a part who wants to lay on the couch and be lazy. You have a part who comes out when you're angry and they deal with, that.
Danger.
Uh, yeah. You're basically just made up of a bunch of different parts who are uh, symbolizing a family of some sort, or not of some sort. I'm explaining this not in the best way I could, but I'm doing my best. It's supposed to simulate what a real family is supposed to teach you, which is if you have a sibling, and if anyone who's had siblings has had this happen, where they take your stuff and you get really angry about it, and then you go tell your mom, and then your mom tells you to stop fighting or don't tattletale. It never gets anything solved. Your feelings are still hurt, your stuff is still gone. And usually when that happens, it results in a fist fight, or you don't ever get the problem resolved. In a family, you can't be like, well, you know what? I am never going to talk to you again. Ever. I don't need you in my life. You can't say that to your sister who lives 2 doors down from you in the hallway. It's not feasible. So you have to learn how to work it out. And so at that point, you have to go, hey, sister, brother, why did you want this so bad? Did you want it for an outfit? Did you just want to piss me off by stealing my stuff? Why did you do this? And accept their answer and then figure out how you feel about it. That's basically what you're supposed to do with your own parts. And when you're procrastinating with something, like you don't want to, with the resistance of not wanting to do the self-discovery course, or not necessarily the course, but all of the work in it. I had to listen to that part that was like, I don't want to do this. It's boring. Or I've already done this. Or you can just wing it. You can. You've done it before. I had to listen to that part and say, okay, well, why are you trying to get me to do this? And sometimes it was, this is not a subject that I want to approach. Other times it was like, man, you worked your ass off and you're tired and you need to really go take a nap, and you know that you can handle this, so you don't have to worry about it. But until I took the time to stop and listen to that part, I didn't know what was going on, and I was just functioning without thinking. I was just acting or reacting, I guess.
Responding. Being responsible.
I was not being responsible. I was not I was responding to my environment, but not.
I tricked you there.
You did. You threw me for a loop. I'm like, wait, I can feel my eyes going back and forth, being like, how do I, what? Huh?
It was
I'm
a hypnotic
sorry.
trick.
That was on purpose, totally.
It was a trick.
You're so mean.
But not really. Not really
So,
mean.
So Willow, I really like the internal family systems model and the idea that you have firefighters which come out whenever you're threatened, and they do things that may be helpful in the moment but damaging over the long term. And they could damage relationships or damage you physically or create longer lasting problems for you. And then your managers are what kind of keeps the peace. So you kind of keep everything on an even keel using your managers, and they protect your exiles. So your exiles are childhood wounds or things that happened in the past that you don't want to let out. And if it looks like you're going to get triggered, then your firefighters come up and hose down the fire, right?
I was gonna make one correction, because this is something I actually misspoke about earlier. Your parts are not there to necessarily protect the exile. They are there to protect self. And self is a part that every single person has. It has a specific characteristics that we don't have to go into right this second. But everyone has a self, and that is the part that is being surrounded by these managers, these firefighters, and being kept away from the exile to protect self. So all of these behaviors, that's the fascinating thing about IFS is um, if you have a client who comes in and they're cutting themselves, you don't automatically assume um, that this part of them is bad and wants them to die and doesn't want the best for them. IFS prompts you to say, clearly they're getting something out of this that is keeping them alive because otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. And it changes the whole perspective on how you hold yourself accountable. Because instead of saying, I'm a terrible person because I ate an entire cake, which I have done on numerous occasions, you say, all right, I just ate that whole piece of cake. Maybe I'm feeling, self-conscious and I want to gain some weight so that men don't look at me as much anymore. That's a thing. There's been clients, not my personal clients, but clients who have gone on like weight training programs and 6 months later they've gained back more weight than the trainer thought was possible. And when it was dug into it deeper and they weren't shamed for it, a lot of them said that they started eating a lot more and having the cravings when men were starting to be interested in them sexually. And so when they were bigger, they were overlooked and they didn't get that attention. So they didn't need to, it kept them safe in a way. It wasn't actually damaging. What would have been more damaging was having to deal with intimate relationships at that point.
Yeah, I can attest that it's being bigger, you get less attention, but it's a good thing because it's not as much of a, I don't know, like sometimes it's too much.
Yeah. And it goes the other way with like over sexualizing your body or clothes to try and gain control of the situation because you're the one who is initiating the reaction. Like you feel in control of it because what you were wearing made them look at you different or act differently towards you or get the response that you wanted. It goes both ways. But the like I said before, the most fascinating part and the most helpful part of IFS is you don't approach these issues as if it is a self-damaging thing. We all know it's self-damaging. You approach it as if this is like a drug that someone has to be on because they can't cope right now, and your goal is to get them off of this, but you can't just take them off of it because you're gonna have even more issues.
It'd be like replacing like what they did at the beginning of the 20th century where somebody was addicted to morphine. They would replace it with heroin to help them get off morphine, or the other way around. It'd be like that.
Well,
not so good.
It's
Not so
similar to
good.
like if you're on heroin and your I can't remember who, I think it would be your psychiatrist or your doctor says you can't be on heroin anymore. It doesn't matter why you're on heroin, but you can't be on heroin. That's not okay. You have to stop that right now. What is that heroin addict supposed to do that night when they go home?
Yeah.
What are they
They're
gonna
going to replace it with other dysfunctional behavior because
because there
it
was an
needs to
issue.
be in correlation with therapy and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and you need to learn how to replace. You can't just replace it with anything. You're either going to replace it with a subpar coping mechanism or
But it doesn't have to be heroin. It could be sugar, or it could be cigarettes, or it could be,
yeah.
whatever else, the self-destructive behavior, shopping, any self-destructive behavior that one might engage in to distract
Binge watching
themselves.
Netflix.
Well, I mean, just like with my vape, I had to admit, you actually, Agnieszka, you clued me into this that I don't smoke because I want to hurt myself. I switched to a vape because I needed something to smoke. I need the physical.
The
Maybe I don't need.
it's an oral fixation. And so the theory about the oral fixation is a lot of the children who had some challenging in childhood. It's like the same thing, like a dog will lick his paws just before sleeping because that brings them back to early childhood and how the mother used to lick the puppy. And so it's a similar thing, you're like the oral fixation gives you some satisfaction that's like subconscious, right?
Yeah, that too. But I was thinking about the breathing regulation because I still need it because I get really anxious. Like it, I don't know if anyone's noticed. I notice it every single time. Anytime someone goes to talk to me, if I have a couple of seconds, I will hit my vape just because someone is addressing me. Because I'm like, it's my way of doing the deep breath because I actually hold my breath a lot.
I was actually
Okay.
okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So speaking of accountability, I'm going to reel
No,
you guys back in off of
no,
your
no.
Freudian side trip,
Don't hold us
your
accountable.
Did you know?
psychodynamic
Did
Freudian side trip.
Did you know that we're both Sagittariuses, right? Like yeah. I'm not
And
sure.
because we're getting close to time, and
Oh,
I'm going to channel
oh,
my inner Mike
uh,
and say we need to talk about our journaling. And I will go first and say that, as usual, I did my Emeraldy spreadsheet, and I had a very good week of Emeraldy activities last week. And there's a few things that I missed, but I think it was challenging because my daughter had a huge set of activities that needed to be attended to, and then my son was coming in from college, and there were just kind of an overwhelming set of obligatory things to go do. Uh,
which
so I
cuts
think
into your time for
we're
preparing for
coming
the.
down from some of that, and yeah, that's what I learned through my journaling.
Yeah, I for me with the journaling, I it was kind of an emotional week for me last week, so I just kept writing emotional things, and it does help. Um, I do more and more and more. I turn to my journal when I'm feeling overwhelmed, where I'm having emotions, like even the distracting emotions. Like, say I want to sit down to work and I'm finding a thought that's like distracting, like, oh, is that lady gonna pay? Right? And
Yeah,
it's like distracting me from work. So then I'll write like even a few sentences in my journal, just like, oh, I'm feeling anxious about this, da, 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 just say what I think. And then I put the journal aside. It's almost like I deposited um, the I deposit my thoughts or emotions into the journal, so now I can move on with my life.
I like that.
So it's like a bank deposit.
I'll be honest. I did really bad. Well, actually, last week I didn't do too bad. I think I missed 2 days on journaling. But I found that I'm not as anxious about missing a couple days because I'm getting better at like waking up and saying, "Oh, I had some weird dreams." Like I had a dream last night, something about I am addicted to watching the show Shameless on TV, and there's a character in there named Malkovich. And I ended up running into this character in my show, and I was like, I know how to deal with a Malkovich. But it was like I woke up and I'm like, oh, okay, I just had a weird, funny dream. Cool. But the other day I would wake up and I've noticed that if I don't have someone to call and talk to about like this crazy, weird dream that I don't know what's happened, why it was there, I write it down. And so I'm getting better at gauging what is trivial thoughts versus something that has been on my mind and crossing my mind, but I haven't picked up the pattern yet. I'm starting to pick up the pattern of thoughts that are weighing on my mind and writing those down. So I've kind of come across the same experience as Agnieszka, where when I'm really needing it, I know where to turn to. I know if I need to write it down. I know if I need to call Agnieszka and Deirdre. I know if I need to call my mom. Like I know who I can get the comfort and the support that I need and not just what I'm craving. Because I will go straight to booze and sugar.
Writing down your dreams, that's very Jungian
She was
of
I
you.
I have to. I only lucid dream, so I
I
don't
like
have
that.
regular dreams.
so,
Well,
and she's a fan of
maybe you could
Young.
find out the lottery numbers for me in your next dream.
I've had like dream premonitions. Actually, Agnieszka, do you remember the dream that I told you about the puppy that I resuscitated and then the next day all of a sudden this puppy came back to me?
Yeah,
I remember how the fur felt and it was
yeah.
so strange because my boss the next day really needed help going to pick up her dogs from someone else's house. And I was like, "Do you need help? Because I'm more than willing to help you." and I was holding the dog in my lap, and I was doing this on its fur, and I was like, "Oh, you're the dog! You're the dog!" I was like, "This is what it felt like." And then I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe that was just somewhere in my dream where I was like, someone might need some help." And I don't know. It was like it felt like a premonition, but I'm really hesitant to be like, "Oh, I have premonitions all the time," and
Whatever.
Well,
It's all good.
we're looking forward to whatever premonitions you have in the next show between now and then. And I think for tonight, we're probably ready to sign off. It's been fantastic chatting with you all, and I think we covered a lot of ground. And looking forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, this is the overview show. We should label it that. So perfect. It's lovely to see you guys today. I'm really glad to have been here in this beautiful podcast. Willow?
I'm really glad to have been here too. Everyone have sweet dreams.
All right. Oh, outro. There we go. We can do this. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.